therapist working at Children First, and I'm also a mother of a 4-year-old, and just like you, trying to navigate through this whole lockdown during the coronavirus and figuring out what works for our family and uh, how to survive this. So, today I'm going to talk to you about steering family dynamics in the time of Corona, during this lockdown. I think it's a very important theme to talk about because we all are coming from different backgrounds and different family setups, and before the lockdown we had certain roles that we all were donning and we were living a certain kind of a life, and then suddenly it all just came to a standstill, and we are in this situation where we continue to fulfill those roles in whatever capacity that we can, and at the same time we've also been forced to take on a lot more roles, and some roles, the characterization of these roles have changed quite a bit, and it can be really confusing, and it can be extremely confusing as a parent, because not only do you need to prioritize yourself and your mental health and your professional health and your personal health and your household health, you also have a young child's health to take care of. So how do we do this whole balance? So the good part is, thanks to internet and global connectivity, there are enough resources out there on what we should do, what we can do as individuals to ground ourselves, to feel motivated, to feel sustained, the number of activities there are for children, and depending on what skills you want to teach them. And there are also a lot of relationship based advices and things to do. But which one do we fit into? I mean, which one is best suited for us? Which one, how do we pick that? How do we get to know, okay, you know what, this resource I really like and I want to try. So that got me thinking that today, and for today's talk, what I would really like to focus on is this, that how do we start? Where do we start from thinking about what we want to do for us? What do we want to do for ourselves as individuals, and what do we want to do for ourselves as parents? What do we want to do for ourselves as family? And as a unit, what do we want to do for ourselves? And the answer to these questions, again, don't lie in one single person, but they lie in each and every person's response to this, each and every member in the family, their response to it. So I decided to have a conversation with my husband, and he indulged me and agreed to even let me record the session. And my daughter also, I had a conversation with her, and I managed to record that also. And based on this, there are some questions that I have come up with, which I think are very important for us to answer for ourselves. These questions, I would be sharing these videos right now with you, and in those you might see those questions written out, which how you choose to respond to is again dependent on each person. You could either do like a quiet time alone where you have these questions written down for yourself and you're answering, you're taking time to reflect, observe your natural day, how it's going about. If you don't have immediate answers, don't force yourself to answer these questions. Like I said, just observe yourself through the day and just experiences, and then note down these answers in your journal. And then based on the responses to these questions, you can choose to share them with your family members, your partner, your parents, your children, if you think they are at an age where they might be able to understand some of these answers. Though it is a personal choice, but I do feel that it is important to share. And which, when you will see some of these videos that I'm going to share with you, you will understand why. The other way to go about it is to have conversations, interesting conversations with your partner as a family. Like you can sit with your partner and do it one-on-one interaction where you can take turns to answer these questions. You can, if it's a larger family where you have your parents or your in-laws staying with you, maybe if everyone is comfortable enough doing it in a time where all the adults sit down together. If your kids are really young, it might be a little difficult to do it as a family. So you could first do it between yourselves and then do a time with your child. Or if they are of an age where you think it might actually help to have a round table conversation, why not go ahead and do it? It's really interesting how everyone's collective thoughts and wisdom can really help in finding a way. So the questions are going to follow in the video, and I hope these questions help you understand and align as a family your intent and your personal and family goals as to what calls as survival of this lockdown, and survival not just for the heck of physically surviving, but also feeling satisfied, sufficient, sustained, and at the same time energetic and renewed. So let's move on to the videos and see how they go. So what would you call a normal day in today's times, like during this lockdown? What a normal day is like for you?
A normal typical day would be a day that begins but doesn't end because very hectic.
Hectic.
From the word go, early in the morning till late night. You're on your feet, either busy with home chores or with office work or spending time with your kid, your parents, or your wife. So it's all chock-a-blocked in one entire day.
So how many roles would you say, if I could ask you, how many roles do you take on during this one single hectic day?
Multiple roles, from being a working professional to being a parent to being the house help when it comes to cleaning the house in terms of sweeping and sobbing, cleaning the utensils, also donning the new role of a cook. So there are close to about 6 roles to 7 roles that one wears today under the lockdown.
Yeah. And so yeah, these 6 to 7 roles, if you had to, like, let me say, make a pyramid or give them a rank. So rank 1 being the role that you think according to you, you have been able to fulfill the criteria and do it to its best and also feel equally satisfied about it. And the bottommost, the 6th or 7th rank would go to something that's getting completely neglected or lost.
I think currently I'm doing a great job in terms of being a parent because most of my day goes kind of taking care of Imara. And then obviously I think I'm not doing a great job in terms of my workspace because as Imara doesn't let me work. And then since we don't have the support now that we need to kind of maintain the house. So yes, I think that has kind of held me back or kind of prevented me from doing my best from a work aspect.
Sure. So if I was to like list it down like this, 1 to 7, I put 1 as parent role and 7 as work role. Would you like to fill out the?
Then you can put number 2 as cleaning in terms of doing washing the dishes and sweeping the house, and then 3rd could be to cook, 4th could be the laundry. That's it. And then obviously spending time with the family.
So currently you are doing 6 roles then.
Yep.
So in the before the lockdown.
Yeah.
And your typical day or your typical life, and if you had to take on these exact same roles, how would you list them before the lockdown? What was at number 1 and what was at number 6?
Number one would obviously become work. Number two would become parent, and then you can take your pick. Everything else was being taken care of. From a cook, laundry perspective, yes. Obviously, after parenthood, even family time. But yeah, rest of the stuff would be taken care of by the support staff.
Sure. So, I mean, of course, there are some things which would come. So, I've just for now put it as miscellaneous. So, technically, before the lockdown, you were taking on 4 roles, and now you are taking on 6 roles, and the position of everything has changed
Yeah.
in this. So, would it be right for me to say that the work role is getting neglected in this whole process?
Yes.
Sure. So, if there was one thing that you could move up the list in this situation in the lockdown, if there was something that you could move up, which one would it be? And if something you could move down, which one would it be?
Work role would go up.
Sure.
I think cleaning would have come down.
Sure.
But I guess also need to prioritize and kind of get into a more, I think, regular routine that kind of puts everything into place.
Sure.
Like work role could increase if I would, because I know my day is jam packed. So kind of do most of the heavy lifting in terms of work post night time. So for example, if Mara goes to sleep at about 8 o'clock, make sure she goes to sleep by 8. We got few hours, about 3 to 4 hours, work till about 1. Yeah, work's done then.
Sure. Okay. So, and why is it that you want to move work up?
Because that is what pays the bills.
Sure. Yeah.
And especially during this time, if you're not going to work, you're not going to get salary. Yeah, sticky times. So obviously work has to be one of the main objectives.
True. And why would you want to then push cleaning down?
Clean out because that is something that other people in the household also can take responsibility for. So kind of manage better.
So that brings me to this list that you have made, and if you had to change these positions around in the lift, do you think it's something that you can do on your own, changing the positions in the list, or you would need to recruit people to help you?
This can be done ourselves, especially have other people in the household who are living in the house, kind of have better communication with them, kind of divide the roles better, make sure that everybody is doing certain amount of lifting. I think that's the best way to kind of delegate work.
And do you think other people in your family also have such lists in their mind?
Absolutely. I think everybody would have a list in their mind, especially during this time.
Yeah.
I guess best thing is to communicate and kind of understand what the other person brings to the table and how you can be a better support to them and how they can be a better support to you.
And do you think your child has a list?
Sure, absolutely. The child's list is totally do with ma dada, mama dada, that's it. I think ideally you should kind of sit down with your kid also and figure out what she or he needs and kind of work on that. Because ultimately it's the entire family that has to work together during this time.
Great. So, Imara, do you know why we are at home? Why all of us are at home these days?
Because coronavirus is there, you can't go out.
Yeah. And now that we all are at home, which part of being home do you like?
I like to play. I like to play games. And I like to play with Dada. And I like to play with Gracie. And last I want to play with Mama.
Oh. Acha, but which parts you don't like of being at home?
I don't like to be at home. I like to play with just cousin.
Oh, you're missing your friends. So the not being able to see your friends, you're missing. But tell me, now that we are at home with Mama, Dada, and everybody, and if Mama and Dada say ki you can plan your day, you can decide once you wake up what all you can do. What are the 5 things you want to do once you wake up?
I want to get up, brush my teeth. Then after brushing my teeth, I want to eat breakfast. Then after breakfast, I want to play for some time. Then after what I want to play, I want to watch TV for some time. Then I want to drink milk.
Oh wow, so many things. You want to eat also, you want to brush your teeth also, you want to play also, you want to watch TV also, and you want to drink milk also. So,
and I want chocolate in it.
Okay, so now see, we have 10 fingers. 5 you have chosen. Can 5 things Mama and Dada choose?
Yes.
Okay, so 5 things that we are choosing are that you have to take a bath. If you play with your toys, you have to put them back. Maybe you can help in some cooking. You can wash the rice, or you can make the atta, or you can do mixing when we do some baking. And number 5, when Mama and Dada are working, we can do quiet time. Do you know how to do quiet time when Mama and Dada are working?
When I go to the library with my mom, I'll be quiet.
Yeah. Is there anything that you want to remind Mama and Dada? Do you want Mama and Dada when something you are doing and we should not trouble you? Anything that you want to tell us?
When I have my paper laptop, you should not trouble me.
Oh, when you are doing your school time on laptop, we should not disturb you. Okay, done. So you will not trouble us when we are on the laptop, and we will not trouble you when you are on the laptop. Okay. Hi, so I hope these videos were helpful. Just to let you know that it's not the answers that are important, because it's very much possible that the responses that you get from within yourself or from different members in your family might be very different from those of my husband and my child. But it's the intent behind these questions that are more important, because they help to identify what is important to each one of us during and before, and why these belief systems have been questioned and changed. And if we are able to value and respect these intent of each and other in the family, it's easier to align and come together to figure out a doable way of living right now. It's also important that the communication has to be respectful and non-judgmental. And for the video about children, as you could see that if a 4-year-old can answer these questions, then you can imagine what a little older age group, 6, 8, 10-year-olds could come up with as responses and answers to these questions. And the reason why, one of the main reasons why I really recommend that get your child to answer some of these questions is simply because they are experts on their own life. They are the experts of their childhood and how they envision their life. So even they are taking on various roles. So it's important to hear their say, and instead of completely planning for them, let's see what plans they have for themselves and how much of those plans we can align to, and then they would be willing to align to our plans. So all the very best, and I hope these questions were helpful and this video was helpful, and we would try to respond to any of your queries in the comment section. Thank you so much for tuning in.
my name is Bhavya Kulshreshtha. I'm a psychologist working with Children First, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the current situation, which is the global pandemic and the lockdown in the country, and how that's impacting the mental health of young people today. While this is a novel situation for everybody experiencing it, this situation has made many people challenge their ideas of their daily routine and their daily lives, something that was very basic for a lot of people. We now have to rethink our ideas around work and productivity. We have to rethink our ideas about family dynamics and household chores. Even ideas of personal space are being challenged. And of course, that would have an impact on people's mental health. So, what does this impact look like? It's important for us to understand and explore it so that we might be able to support the people who are struggling right now. What we are hearing from people, young people specifically, are increases in feelings of anxiety or worry or uncertainty. Even lowness or sadness has seen an increase or a rise. There are also feelings of isolation or feelings of loneliness and frustration at not being able to carry out tasks the way that we were used to, in the way that we used to live our lives before. All of these things together can cause a significant impact on our mental health, and these feelings can actually be really intense for some people. So, it might be important for us to discuss today who are the people who are being impacted and what does this impact look like, and what are some of the things that we might be able to do in our daily lives to mitigate or reduce or resist the impact of some of these feelings. I'd like to highlight here that um, some of the things that we might be feeling or experiencing right now are completely normal and valid reactions to something of this proportion coming and causing chaos and disruption in our lives. So, the aim here is not to pathologize, but to look at increasing levels of health anxiety or stress as something that we might need to provide additional support to people for. And I'm specifically thinking of which populations amongst young people might have been most strongly affected by something like this. The people who come to mind are young people who might have been looking to or were already accessing mental health services by consulting a therapist or a psychiatrist, who've had their access to these professionals blocked, and whom can't reach out to them in the same way that they used to. I'm also thinking about people whose mental health concerns or needs have kind of increased during this time, who are looking to find reliable professionals to reach out to. I'm thinking of young people who are institutionalized, who are living within a structured institution, and whether they have enough staff to be supporting them, whether they're getting adequate amount of supplies, whether the government is providing adequate funding, and whether they're well taken care of. I'm thinking about people who have been stranded away from their families, who are kind of riding out this lockdown alone or with friends, but without the contact with their loved ones sometimes. I'm also thinking of people who are with their families but whose homes aren't safe spaces to ride down this lockdown in. I'm also thinking of people who are experiencing financial instability or uncertainty in terms of their job security or the kind of income that they might be having at this time. All of these sections of young people, therefore, might be experiencing mental health concerns and might need additional support. Some of the ways in which young people take care of their mental health may not be as accessible anymore. For example, having a routine that is somewhat set or predictable, being able to take personal space, being able to access friends or support systems may not be as easy anymore. We may be unable to step out for leisure activities, and even some significant life events like weddings or birthdays may have been disrupted. So, what are some of the things that we can do to take care of our mental health during this lockdown? I'm going to be looking at just a few simple exercises that you might be able to do that might help induce calm or relaxation or just decrease the intensity of stress a little bit. One of the first things that I'm going to be doing is something very basic that you might have heard a lot of people talk about, which is called breath work. Breath work basically is about how we are breathing in the moments in which anxiety comes to visit. And I usually encourage people to do something called 4-7-8 breathing. So it's important here that we be as observant about our body as possible. And what I'd like you to do is place one hand on your chest and one hand on your stomach. You can't see what I'm doing here. But as you do that, I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose and exhale through your mouth. Keep inhaling and exhaling, and as you do, I want you to feel what it feels like when your chest comes out and your stomach comes out when you take a breath in, and how it gently goes inward when you're exhaling. You can also notice your breath, how it's cooler when it goes in through your nose and warmer when it comes out through your mouth. As you inhale and exhale, you can now include counts into your inhalation and exhalation. So when you inhale, I want you to count for 4 seconds. After that, I would like you to hold your breath for 7 seconds. If 7 seconds is not possible, please only hold your breath for as much as you feel comfortable. And then when you're exhaling, I want you to exhale slowly and count up to 8. So for 8 seconds, you'd exhale. So that's inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7 seconds if possible, and slowly exhale for 8 seconds. The second technique that I'm going to be talking about is something called sensory grounding. Sensory grounding is a great way to bring our awareness back to our bodies and in the present moment. And the reason I encourage people to use this is I find that often when anxiety comes to visit, it makes us think about things in our past or orients our thoughts towards the future. Thoughts about the past can sound like, memories or thoughts about something distressing or worrying that's happened before. Thoughts about the future, especially in the present moment, can sound like, am I going to get into that university that I applied to? When is this lockdown going to end? Will it ever end? What will the world look like? Am I going to be okay? Are my loved ones going to be okay? Am I going to have my job when I leave the situation, when everything goes back to how it used to be? And these thoughts about the past or the future can really make us not concentrate or unable to focus on what it is that we need to get done in the here and now, or the situation that we want to be present in right now. So sensory grounding is a great way to bring our awareness back to the present. The way that sensory grounding works is to follow the rule of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This involves using our 5 senses to follow this rule. So I'll ask you to take a few deep breaths before you start and keep breathing deeply as you look around the room and tell me about 5 things that you can see. And I encourage people to look for 5 different colors, things that are different colors, or things that are in different parts of the room. And as you see them, you can also name them and describe them as you go. The next is 4 things that you can touch. Look for things that are different kinds of textures. You could take off your shoes and feel the floor beneath your feet. You could use your hands to feel the texture of a soft pillow, a wooden piece of furniture, maybe even your hair and your clothes. Any 4 items that are nearby or around you that you could feel. The 3 is about 3 different things that you can hear. So close your eyes and listen for sounds in the environment around you. These could be the sounds of birds chirping outside, a conversation happening somewhere in the distance, the clock ticking, leaves rustling in the wind, music playing somewhere, whatever you can hear in the environment around you. Next is 2 things that you can smell. If you're at home and if these things are accessible, I encourage people to look for their favorite perfume or scented product that they could smell. You can also go to the kitchen and smell your favorite food or any baked goods that might be there. Some people even do smell their hair or their skin. And the last thing is one thing that you can taste. I really encourage people to look for something small and easy to eat, like a mint or a toffee or a chocolate or something like that. By engaging all of our 5 senses now, we've kind of oriented our thoughts and our awareness to what's going on in the moment right now. The last thing that I'll be jumping into for this segment is related to sleep disturbances. So, a lot of people have reported to me that the way that anxiety affects them is by reducing the quality and quantity of their sleep. Some people are also experiencing nightmares or difficulties in falling asleep, or they might be waking up way earlier in the morning than they intended to. All of these difficulties can then have greater impacts throughout the day, leading to tiredness, low energy, irritation, and drowsiness, things like that. So, how can we improve the quality and quantity of our sleep? Well, there are a couple of simple points that come under a larger sleep regimen, which is called sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene is all about incorporating good practices into our routine that might help improve or make better how we sleep. There are a few tips and tricks that could be used here. One is that now that we're working from home, we may feel tempted to work from the bed, or we may feel tempted to work from places that we would usually rest in. I would really encourage you to keep those places separate so that you work at a specific area designated for work and you use the bed only when you want to rest or when you want to sleep. What message this sends to our brains is that this space is only for sleeping, and therefore we become accustomed to the idea of coming to that space and falling asleep. Versus if we train the brain to think of that place as also a place of work. So, anytime we come to the bed, if we're working, at night when we visit the bed again, our brain is used to being active and alert in that space, and we might have difficulty sleeping. So, keeping those two spaces separate and using the bed only for sleep might be helpful. One of the other things that we can practice in sleep hygiene is having a set routine as predictable as possible in order to get 6 to 8 hours of sleep. So, having a set time at which you put away your gadgets, preferably at least half an hour before sleeping, and then having a set time at which you're trying to wake up, preferably around the time that you would wake up normally in order to go to school, college, or to work. A third point here would be about the usage of screens. I know that a lot of screen usage has gone up in the last couple of weeks. Screens emit blue light. Blue light automatically tells our bodies that it is time to be alert and awake and active, whereas yellow lighting sends a message to our brains that it's time to sleep and it's time to kind of slow down and wind down the day. So there is a setting on most devices that allows you to turn the yellow lighting off. I would suggest that you turn that setting on so that yellow light starts to emit from your devices at least 2 to 3 hours before you're ready to sleep. And like I mentioned in the previous point, put away gadgets at least half an hour before you are planning to sleep. A fourth thing that you can try if you're having sleep difficulties is to try the app Headspace. Headspace provides guided mindfulness-based meditations. They have a great module on sleep right now, which is free at present, and you can access that. It allows the guided meditation to kind of take you through different kinds of breathing and thought practices that might allow you to sleep a little bit more easily. There are also different kinds of videos available freely on YouTube that have sleep music that incorporates the delta waves of our brain. You can just listen to that and fall asleep to that if that works for you. There are also ASMR videos on YouTube that have been shown to be effective in helping people fall asleep. Yeah, and that's it for sleep. The other thing that I wanted to highlight, although this is not a technique or something that you could try in terms of doing something for your mental health on your own, there are various resources that have been made available in the present moment, online resources for mental health during the lockdown. And I thought I'd mention a couple of them here. So organizations like Children First have opened up their services online. We are providing therapy on a sliding scale fee for young people. And there are very many organizations like us who are doing the same. So you can find information about that. We'll try to maybe give you a resource or link it somewhere. There are several helplines that are operating right now, which are accepting calls at no charge. There is a helpline by Nimhans. There is a helpline by iCall. Both of these can be contacted at certain numbers during certain times in the day. there are organizations like Blue Dawn or the Hank Nunn Institute that are doing a bunch of different kinds of workshops or online book clubs and things like that. Reflective Arena is one of the groups that I know of that has an online support group. There are also some arts-based therapy and journaling prompts and things like that that are being curated by psychologists across different social media platforms. So we might try to give you a list of some of these resources that are accessible and to help maybe look into mental health concerns. And yeah, that's it for me. Thank you so much for joining into this session today, and I hope that you found it helpful. We're happy to take any questions or comments in the comment section, and we'll reply to you as soon as we can.
Hi all, my name is Harshita and I'm a counseling psychologist here at Children First. Thank you for joining me today, and for the next 10 minutes I'd like to speak to you about the mental health effects of this pandemic, particularly how they present in more vulnerable sections of the society, in more marginalized communities, in individuals that have intersections of identities that render them more at risk for mental health difficulties during this time. These also include people that have severe mental health difficulties to begin with, pre-existing conditions, or chronic difficulties such as maybe chronic pain, disabilities, or neurodevelopmental disorders that require consistent intervention. To begin with, I would like to acknowledge the universality of what we're all going through. It is indeed unprecedented, and there is an undercurrent of dread that's running through all of our veins. And we all feel a certain sense of unsafety as the institutions and things that we relied on previously have sort of been shifted overnight, and we don't feel like we can rely on those pillars anymore, and we don't feel supported in some ways, in many ways, in most ways. However, the effects of the pandemic, the mental health effects of the pandemic, much like the pandemic itself, aren't felt uniformly by all sections of society. There are people, there are communities that are more at risk for mental health difficulties during these times than others. What is important to note here is that these depend on the identities that we had before this pandemic began. A lot of it has to do with possibly the social location that we occupied and how our existing conditions might have been exacerbated. So in a sense, what we can imagine is that the people that were previously more secure feel less secure, and the people that feel less secure are on the margins. The people that were on the margins are more explicitly at risk and more explicitly vulnerable than ever before. And this sort of all of us taking a step back and renegotiating where we stand in society makes us more susceptible to a range of mental health difficulties. In that sense, what the novel coronavirus has done is not simply make us feel like we could fall sick due to it, but it has also opened up a host of possibilities of indirect effects such as abuse, exploitation, homelessness, further marginalization, a minimization of identity, a range of psychological and psychiatric disorders that we might be more vulnerable to, issues such as our responses to maybe previously existing trauma or depression being exacerbated during these times, obsessive compulsive tendencies also being exacerbated during these times. I'd like to paint these with broad strokes over the next couple of minutes as we sort of journey through what it might mean to live inside a pandemic when we are more vulnerable already. Let's start with what it might mean for people to be in abusive spaces or have to return to abusive spaces. Individuals that were in abusive relationships, partnerships, or within families may have found refuge in hostels and workplaces and going to different places around the community, staying away from home. Since these opportunities of staying away are now restricted, safe spaces and safe hours for individuals are also harder to access. Add to that the possible financial dependence and the greater presence of the perpetrator within close proximity, as well as the possible lack of cooperation from other support systems such as family, police, the legal systems, and it creates a cocktail of the possibility of abuse being exacerbated. This is also corroborated by the fact that there has been a rapid increase in the number of cases of domestic violence and abuse ever since the lockdown has begun, not only in India but all over the world. People that face chronic disabilities or mental health difficulties are also facing a triple jeopardy during this time. And it's important to remember that there are certain conditions that lend themselves to the nature of the pandemic, such as obsessive compulsive disorder and other anxiety disorders. We're seeing that this is what is being called a personal nightmare for a lot of individuals that have contamination or hygiene difficulties within obsessive compulsive disorder. Individuals that might have panic disorder or phobias might see these fears exacerbated during this time, and they might suffer from panic attacks. They might suffer from a feeling of loss of control and an inability to maybe carry on with daily tasks as these difficulties get in the way of their best hopes for themselves during this time. Individuals that are institutionalized are also facing severe difficulties currently in accessing a robustness of healthcare, mental health care, as access to inpatient facilities, groups, as well as a reduction of support staff during the lockdown has led to a lack of efficacious intervention for individuals that might need regular intervention, such as young children who might be autistic, who might be receiving early intervention and need that kind of routine every day. This would be a significant hindrance during these times. Similarly, LGBTQ individuals who are currently either away from their native homes or parental homes that might not be as accepting, might be forced to return to these places. Trans individuals who might be transitioning do not have access to the requisite hormones that they might need. Added to that, when we think about the trans bill that was passed last year, it does create a very fertile ground for a host of mental health difficulties to emerge. It's important to remember that even previously, the rate of mental health difficulties for LGBTQ individuals was much higher. So the addition of the pandemic, which may lead them to have to surrender their systems of support, whether that be community support or financial support or shelter, it creates a very fertile ground for a host of mental health issues to be brought up. We should also take a moment to acknowledge the mental health effects, the psychological effects for the frontline workers right now, the healthcare workers that are on the front lines of this contagion, and what might be happening at that end. As a lot of people have called this, this is already a mental health pandemic in the making, as we're going to see a dramatic rise in the increase and the need for mental health intervention amongst healthcare workers. This was previously very well documented during 9/11, where after the attacks, the first responders did suffer from a range of difficulties such as PTSD, depression, substance use. In order to prevent this from happening, it is important for us to think in advance. During this time, it's also important to ask ourselves how we can make concrete meaning of the fact that all mental health issues during this time will come from structural violence. And it is important to remember that mental health issues are issues of social justice. In order for us to remember that, we can do simple reflective exercises such as asking ourselves what identities feel the most vulnerable, who in society right now, if we just look around and make an assessment, who in our immediate surroundings is more vulnerable and who is less vulnerable to the pandemic, to the direct and the indirect effects of the pandemic. I would like to leave you with some questions around this. And I would like you to think about these questions as I invite you to think together with me, and I invite you to collaborate through commenting below, through writing to us. So the questions are, how can we create space for the various mental health effects of the pandemic? What might it mean for us to richly and meaningfully acknowledge these stories? How can we honor the response of individuals, including ourselves and our loved ones, who may be struggling with mental health difficulties during a time like this? What lessons do we want to take back from this pandemic? What might you want to retain from this pandemic that you find valuable about the changes that you might want to make, or the vision that you might envisage for yourself, your community, your state, your country? And what is something, maybe a practice, a value, a skill that you would like to leave behind as we move forward in this pandemic? How can we use our privilege to amplify voices from the margins and the difficulties they might be facing? Whose stories of struggle and resilience should be on the front lines right now? I'd like to thank you for staying with me for the last 10 minutes. And I hope you enjoyed the rest of the webinar. Thank you.